back to my channel. Today I'm doing a tutorial on how to read the Alpha friendship bracelet patterns. I know a lot of you have been wanting this because you want to make your own keychains and stuff, so here it is for you. So without further ado, let's just get right into the tutorial. So you're going to need to print out a pattern that you want to make. So to find the patterns, you can just go into Google Images and just type up like Alpha friendship bracelet pattern, Toy Story, or Disney, or whatever you want to do. So this is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to just do a TikTok one because it's fitting. And they're literally just little graphs and grids. Each box is basically like a string, so I'm going to just count all these boxes. So I counted 18 boxes across. Remember, when we do bracelets, we take however many strings we need and then divide it by 2 because we cut really long strings and then fold them in half to get double. So I'm going to cut 9 strings, fold it in half to get 18. All right, so we're gonna have to pick a color on the pattern that we use as like the base color, I guess. So for this pattern in particular, your base color could be the teal, white, or the red. I'm gonna do red because I have a lot of red. And then we're gonna need a background color, which is just the background of the pattern. So the base cannot be the black because that's the background. The base has to be the actual pattern or the image. And again, for these patterns, you can change the colors to whatever colors you want. So this background color doesn't have to be black. It could be white, pink, whatever. You can do whatever color you want. Another thing for these patterns is this is obviously very short. This is not going to fit around my wrist. I don't need to cut the strings to be super long, especially since it's a keychain. So you really don't need to have like super long strings. Since this is a keychain, we don't need to cut a wingspan's length. You can if you want to. You're probably just going to waste a bunch of thread though. And again, if this was like 17 strings across or 19, if it was 17, you would cut 8 full-length strings, fold them in half, and then with that new length folded in half, you would then cut one more string. That's the length of half your strings. So you have 17. Another thing though, since these patterns are super like flexible, you can literally just like cross out this row and then just like not do it. So if you had an odd number, you could just like be like, oh, I want to do another row on this side so I have an even number, then you totally can. But I'm not going to do that. But yeah, you can shave off rows, you can like cut the pattern short if you want to, you can change the direction of it, you can do so many things with these patterns. That's why I like them so much. But okay. I have my 9 strings at my arm length cut. I'm going to fold these guys in half. Now I'm going to need to pick out my background color. I'm going to use black. So I just cut a really long piece of string. And what's awesome about these alpha pattern bracelets is that you can just use really short strings and then just keep adding more string if you run out. And I like to start all my keychains with the little loop in the beginning, like this. This one has a double loop on it, but sometimes I'll do the double loop if the bracelet's really wide. Yeah, I like to start with the little loop in the beginning because it's a keychain, but it's up to you what you want to start it with. If you don't want to do the loop, then that's fine. Another thing I forgot to mention, if you want to do the loop, I would recommend making it a lot bigger than you would for like a button, because this bracelet in particular has a lot of strings, and if you make the loop like this big, the strings will have like nowhere to go, if that makes sense. So just make the loop really wide so that your strings can like fit inside the loop. Alright, so this is my loop. It's a pretty decent size, and now I'm just gonna tape down my loop. I like to tape it like this so that it's nice and secured down. So this is the tail from me doing this loop. I'm gonna just stitch this tail back into my bracelet as I'm doing it, so just ignore that. But I'm gonna go ahead and just do a few rows. I usually like to do at least 2 rows of just straight of the background color, just to get the bracelet started and get all the strings connected and everything going. So I'm gonna just go ahead and do that really quick. Obviously, to do this, if you watched my name bracelet, it's very simple. You're just going to take all your strings, 1 string at a time, of your base color and your background color. If your background color is on the left side, you're going to do forward knots all the way across. If your background color is on the right side, you're going to do backward knots all the way across. So mine's on the left, so I'm going to just start by doing forward knots over every single one of my strings all the way across to the other side of my bracelet. So I just did like 1/2 of all the strings from the loop here, and now I have to go all the way over to this side. So to make it a little bit easier, I like to just take one of the strings and cut a little piece of tape and then kind of just pull that string over and then tape it down right there. So now it's right next to my background color, so then I can just do my knot. Alright, so I just did a full row all the way across here, so I'm going to go all the way back and do it again. And when you do that again, make sure you kind of pull these strings tight to get rid of these little strings up top here. It kind of just like pulls the string taut and tighter. So I'm going to just start doing backward knots all the way across to the other side. Alright, once you've done your first 2 rows or however many rows you want to do before you start your bracelet, you can not even do any rows, you can just start it. I wouldn't, but it's up to you. Now it's time to do our bracelet. So we just did these rows up here, so I'm gonna just cross that out because we already did that, right? So now we're moving down to this row here with this blue in it. And my background color is on the left right now, so I'm going to start on this side for this row. But if your background color was on the right, then you would start on this side for this row. So I'm going to go ahead and count these black knots, or these black boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have 7 boxes for black first before we get to the blue. So I'm going to count my first 7 strings, set these aside, and I'm going to go ahead and just do forward knots on all of these strings. So now we have our first 7 strings with all these black knots on it, just like in the pattern. And now we get to these blue knots here, and we don't have any blue in our bracelet, obviously, so we have to get some blue. So I'm going to just take some blue string, and I'm going to just cut a piece. And we have to add this string to our bracelets since we don't have, I keep saying bracelet, since we don't have any blue in it already, and we need it in the pattern, obviously. So to do that, I'm just going to take a piece of tape, and I'm going to just take this string and tape a piece down next to my keychain here. Take all the strings that are in front of this background color and put this blue string underneath them all. Taking the background color or whatever color you want to change, and I'm going to take this blue and I'm going to go over top of it and set this background string aside. Going back to our pattern, we have 4 blue boxes, so we're going to take 4 of our base string, which is my red, and I'm going to count 4 strings out, set these aside, and then with this blue string, I'm going to do forward knots, making sure I'm crossing over top of my background color. There we go, and I'm going to just do forward knots on these 4 base strings. Alright, I just did those 4 blue knots. And then the rest of this row is going to be all black. So now I'm going to take my black string, go underneath all the previous strings, all the previous base strings that I just did. And I'm going to cross over top of the blue one, set that one aside, grab my next base string and do some forward knots, making sure that blue string is being crossed over. And I'm going to go all the way down this row doing some forward knots. Alrighty, so we just did that row with this line of blue, so I'm just gonna cross that row out. So now we're on this 3rd row here, and our background color is on the right side, so we're gonna start on the right side here. And first we have 1, 2, 3, 4 black boxes, so I'm gonna count out 4 of my base string, set the rest of them aside. I'm gonna just do all backward knots with these since my background color is on the right side. Alright, we just did these 4 black knots. Now we're going to move next. We have 1 red box. So I'm going to just take one of my base strings, which is my red, and I'm just going to do a forward knot over top of that background color, and voila, you have a little red knot there now. We just did that red one. Now we're doing these 3 white boxes, and we don't have any white strings, so I have to cut a piece of white. So just take your other color, my white string now, and I'm going to tape it down as well on the side of my bracelet. I'm going to take my white string, put it underneath all of these other base strings that I already did, cross it over top of my black string, grab my next 3 base strings in line since we're doing 3 white knots, set the rest of them aside, and making sure that that white string's crossing over the black string. I'm gonna do some backward knots. So I just did 3 backward knots for these 3 white boxes. Moving on, now we have 3 blue boxes. I'm gonna count out 3 of my base string and set the rest of them aside. And I'm gonna take my blue string now, and I'm gonna make sure that's underneath everything. It's kind of just sitting here, and cross it over top of the white string, and then do 3 backward knots with these 3 base strings. So we just did those 3 blue knots, and the rest of this row is just gonna be all black knots. So I'm just gonna take the rest of my string and then my black background color. I'm making sure that's underneath all of my bass strings and everything. I'm gonna cross it over top of the blue string, and I'm gonna do backward knots down the rest of my row. All right, I'm gonna just show you one more row because I feel like you've gotten the gist of it by now. But we just did this 3rd row, so I'm gonna just cross that right off and move on down to our 4th row. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 boxes of black first. And I'm starting on the left side since our background color is on the left. So I'm gonna go ahead and count out 7 of my bass string, set the rest of the strings aside, and I'm just gonna do all forward knots on these 7 bass strings with my background color. Alright, so we just did those 7 black boxes, and now I'm moving on to these 3 blue ones. So I'm going to take my blue thread, and I'm just going to cross it over top of my black one, making sure that's underneath any of these strings. Cross it over top, count out my 3 bass strings, and I'm going to just do 3 forward knots with this blue string. Alright, I just did those 3 blue knots. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 white knots, or white boxes. So I'm going to take my white string now, making sure that it's underneath any bass strings, and then I'm going to cross it over top of my blue one, counting out 4 of my bass strings. I'm just going to start doing some forward knots. Alright, we just did 4 of those white knots. Now we have 2 red boxes. So I'm going to just count out 2 of my bass strings. I'm going to just do 2 backward knots over top of that white string. So basically, like, whenever you cross a string over, when you're doing a different color, that string now becomes your new, like, background color. And then the last 2 boxes of this row are just black boxes. So now I'm going to take my black string, making sure that it's underneath all of these base colors and everything, and I'm going to cross it over top of the white string and do my 2 forward knots. And that's basically how you read these patterns. So we'll just cross off this row here, and now you're just going to start on this side and just go about your knot. And if you need to add more string, if you didn't cut enough of one color and you need to have more, then you can just cut another piece and then just tape it down to the side like we always do, and then just cross it over top of your background color and just thread it back into your bracelet. And then your other, like the other color that was too short, you can just cut it off at the end. So kind of as I go throughout this bracelet, I like to kind of cut off all the little tails so it doesn't get super messy. So then once you're done with your bracelet, you basically just kind of go back and you will just cut off all these little tails because nobody wants them. You just cut them off, and I will just tie knots. So sometimes I will tie 2 knots like this one, sometimes I will braid them, or I usually would just tie 1 big knot. This one's like really old, but. Alrighty y'all, so that was the tutorial. I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, let me know down below. And I hope you all make some really awesome keychains. I'd also love to see them if you do make any, so just tag me on TikTok and I will look at them. I love you all. Bye.